Too many teams are indecisive. It's not a good sign going through. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam and this is World's Watch. This is a first time video here or you're new to it, I watch every single playoff series, however every region wants to describe it, championship, season finals, of all participating regions that are going to Worlds. Yes, including that one. Today's on the docket, we've got ourselves the beginnings of the LPL from China, LLA from Latin America, LJL from Japan, and LCS from North America. The other regions have not quite started. Those will start in August. Coming around, I want to give yourself the chances to think about the different metas that have come through, the kind of variety that comes about, the fact that it seems like we're going to have 3 different patches across the board for these playoffs, which is a first for a long time. And most notably, the lack of decisiveness and coordination that I've seen as a trend across the board for many of these teams. But as we go, without further ado, let's look at the series that are from, I'm going to be more specific, the date from the start from the July 20th till July 29th, which is the day I'm recording this. So let's take a look. It's the first playoff of China's LPL in summer of 2023. We've got over here World Elite versus Edward Gaming. And holy smokes, what a series coming from these two, and I say that in some of the worst ways. Now, there are some solid showing in regards of coordination, some creativity, decent enough adaptation, and some good understanding of win conditions. We come into the biggest issue of consistency and actually closing out games, however. It is baffling to see 3 out of the 4 games that were played lost by the team with the gold tempo map and neutral advantages, only for the other team to just swing things and change out the narrative of the entire game. Like it was nothing. Now, it's good to see that Edward Gaming, who won, at least had one game without any blunders as expected. It tells me that the ultimate winner of the series has something going on that's a little bit more consistent than the other one. But their lack of vision control, bizarre macro choices, and inconsistent closing approach will not help them, regardless of their strong teamfight coordination and laning prowess. It's not enough for me to be convinced they'll make the whole distance. For now. My MVP for the series is Ale, who single-handedly shut down Cube in a way that made WE look way more uncoordinated than they actually are. And they're pretty uncoordinated. And we're back with China's LPL still in round 1. We got ourselves Royal Never Give Up versus Ninjas in Pijamas. Oh boy. Now, I'm going to be real here, right? The Ninjas were a stronger team overall, but not in any way that means that they would be a strong Worlds contender. In fact, both teams lacked coordination, proper vision play, strong neutral setup, understanding of their own win conditions. They both had some weird map movement and some very questionable decision making in general, on top of the slow, agonizing play. The thing that saved NIP was the lack of proactive play that came from the Royals. Now, Royal Never Give Up on their end really played on autopilot. It seemed like we would get a lot more proactivity from them once they subbed in Lele. But nope, Game 4 rolls around and they return to their usual form of just farm away, hope that a big mistake happens, only kind of get better at neutral objective play. And sure, Ninjas in Pijamas were slightly better at neutral play, kinda. But regardless of which team here would have gone through, neither are Worlds caliber, and I couldn't see NIP getting past the next round without some either drastic improvements or blunders from their opponent. I give my MVP to Invincible, who managed to really nullify Breathe, but more specifically, end this miserable series altogether. And it's round 2 of China's LPL. We've got ourselves Oh My God versus Edward Gaming, and this is not at all the way I thought it was going to go. Now, OMG looked so good at the start of this series, but my goodness, this isn't the way I expected either side to play. Late game, both sides have some excellent coordination when the teams come together, but they are consistent with the blunders that came from every player on the micro scale that straight up sabotages most of their great coordination. I mean, fantastic team fighting. Granted, the decisions that were done micro are made under pressure with rough vision play to utterly none, rushed neutral setups, and side lane control that is rather abysmal, leaving for, honestly, I can't entirely blame some of these decisions. Now, I also think that both teams struggle with closing out games or even retaining leads in ways that could make a convincing argument that either team would be world caliber. As it is right now, neither are the case. And OMG will have the chance to regroup next year. Edward Gaming did show a solid amount of improvement from their last series, but my goodness, it is not enough to convince me that they'll make it further than round 2 of regionals at best. My MVP of the series is Mako, who was the most consistent player in the bunch and created some solid setups for his team to thrive. And we head off to Japan's LJLs, technically set up as round 2, but it's their upper bracket round 1. We got Crest Gaming Act versus Detonation FocusMe, and it's as people would have expected, it's Detonation all the way. I'm going to be real, it's hard to expect any other team to be the LJL reps internationally. Detonation FocusMe continue to show solid adaptation from game to game, adjusting some issues with either vision when noticeable, tempo control and others, target selection, neutral approach, so on and so forth. My issue, however, comes from how none of these stay fixed permanently from game to game. They'll always crop back up one by one. These players are by far leagues above the team of Crest Gaming Act, who struggle to even find an answer to Utapon, let alone the coordination that was presented. Now, that isn't to say that Crest Gaming Act is a terrible team. They show solid signs of coordination, where to punish appropriately, and sometimes how to get neutrals set up. But pervading feeling that Crest Gaming Act was unable to play to their win conditions or even adapt to from game to game for the wild, chaotic, and downright skill-testing pace that Detonation was bringing to the series is we can't ignore it. Detonation continued to match expectations, and it's only a matter of if they choke at the end and whether or not they find ways to improve enough for Worlds. My MVP of the series is Utapon, whose individual play pulled more resources from Crest Gaming Act than they could actually afford and created spaces for the rest of the team to play to their style. And we're into the second round of the Chinese LPL with Ninjas in Pijamas against Weibo Gaming. And oh boy, for one, NIP showed some impressive vision and coordination, including how to punish some of the issues that Weibo showed us. But if we look at the other side of the rift and realize the level of coordination and micro talent, neutral setups, and how to play around the engage tools that they usually draft for themselves, the difference in skill level is really there. I'd say that Weibo Gaming is a Worlds caliber team, but the inconsistency of play is to be noted and hard to ignore. They look like a super team on their best, but on their worst, they look like they shouldn't even be in the LPL to begin with. Notably, the Shy, who is a sore thumb amongst this roster, really needs to get his act together. Otherwise, honestly, this squad as a whole shows some solid signs of how to approach their win conditions, play around neutral objectives, close out games pretty cleanly. So long as they smooth out some of their issues around vision play and their inconsistency overall, especially on a micro level, I can see this team go the distance. You can see it. My MVP for the series is Xiaohu, whose entire play this series only enables Weibo's gaming to perform great things. And we're back with Japan's LJL's upper bracket first round. We've got FENNEL, or Team FENNEL versus Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. I can see why they're in their position. Just quite honestly, either team moving on from this series would have suited just fine. But I don't think that either of them have what it takes to take down Detonation FocusMe. To be clear, there are moments of brilliance when it comes to coordination, vision play, approach to win conditions, and adaptation from game to game. It's just very heavily overshadowed by the bizarre macro and micro choices once mid to late game rolls around. And that's the thing. Moments of brilliance does not mean consistency or even enough of a consistency to even consider either teams. There are so many moments where one player would get caught, and no matter what both teams would do, they just say, hey, perfect time for a team fight. Teleports fly everywhere. Summoners are blown. All of it. Instead of just, answering cross map or setting up for a future play that would make sense with the tools saved, where would it come handy? I can see why these teams made second and third seed respectively, but in no way do I see how either would be world's caliber as they are now. They would need a massive improvement. My MVP for the series is Dasher, who created a massive presence in all skirmishes while requiring very little resources to do so early game. And we head off into the third round of the Chinese LPL's playoffs. We've got over here Edward Gaming versus Top Esports. And the blue side is the victor of the series. Honestly, either team moving on will likely give the same result for the double elimination portion of the bracket. Both teams have moments of fantastic coordination and team fighting, neutral play, really consistent vision, fairly consistent, solid adaptation from game to game, and some solid creativity when it comes to that adaptation. The issue comes when the need to be proactive and confident in any play arises. Both teams have had weird micro choices or a sense to freeze or randomly give up objectives when they would have had full control or even a heavy lead. Add to the mix Edward Gaming's lack of consistent early gameplay or Top Esports' struggle to consistently close out games, and we have a recipe for disaster for either side. It would be hard for me to say that Top Esports would even beat Bilibili Gaming, let alone JD Gaming, with this particular form, which makes me think that both teams are eventually just going to go to the regionals. My MVP for this particular series is Rookie, who consistently held such strong leads that huge aspects of the game would be swung just by his play and influence alone. And we're back with China's LPL in round 3. We got Weibo Gaming versus LNG Esports. Well, I see over here two teams with incredible coordination, some team fight chops, solid vision play, and creative flank angles. But Weibo had a hard time playing around neutrals and closing out games, while LNG have a hard time creating game plans around their drafted win conditions, heavily relying on neutral timers. Now, Weibo is great at playing to their win conditions, and LNG is great at closing out games where needed, and both teams have had some solid drafting and adaptations from game to game. Do I think that either of them would be strong contenders against JD Gaming? No. Mostly from their weird micro-making decisions, inabilities to properly balloon leads, and lack of ability to increase the pace of the game when holding either full tempo or map control. Without either some crazy changes in either team's play between now and their next series, I can't see how either team would have come close to topping the top 2 of this league. JD Gaming is likely going to be too much. My MVP of the series is Gala, who stayed the most consistent player in all 5 games, just slightly under the radar, applying the necessary pressure and damage to win these games. And we're off with Latin America's LLA's playoff with round 1 in the upper bracket. We got ourselves over here Infinity versus Movistar R7 or Rainbow 7. Now, this series is very exciting to watch, but very concerning on an analyst's perspective. To note, I don't think either of the teams shine in aspects that aren't either laning phase or drafting adaptation. I think their drafting is fairly good, mostly because their coordination is all over the place, consistency is nowhere to be found for any of the micro choices, vision is at best played correctly only while severely ahead, but is usually just shallow and unusable. There is too much bravado with zero setup, and neutrals are either abandoned with no reason or coin flipped with equally amount of reasons. To be clear, Infinity had the stronger approach to everything else that I've mentioned, but they are either so far behind in curve regarding skills from player to player compared to their counterparts, which I don't believe that's the case, or they have so little confidence to go for anything that isn't punishing the wild amount of stupid plays that I saw from Rainbow Seven. If this is the quality to expect from the top-seeded team of this league, I have very few hopes for the LLA reps at Worlds. My MVP for the series is Bong, who seems to genuinely be putting his team on his back to get shit done where possible. And we are back with China's LPL in the double elimination section. Round 1, Top Esports versus Bilibili Gaming. What a way to end a series with the pentakill. Holy. Bilibili deliver on a lot. Some solid vision play, great understanding of their win conditions, superb hold on the pace of the game, and the coordination. Fantastic. Now, I have some issues regarding their haphazard way to play while behind, but at least they are incredibly proactive, either from behind or ahead. Top Esports, for their part, was a lot more competitive than expected, but their lows are still a large problem. From lackluster vision approach, bizarre flanks, some rushed neutrals, it becomes clear that they can compete, but their average doesn't quite match the average that we expect from Bilibili on any given time. I don't see Top Esports making out the lower bracket of this double elimination portion, but we can expect a lot more if this is the kind of performance that we get, especially from what we saw in this series. My MVP for this particular series is Bin, who had an incredible time shutting down Wayward in a way that allowed him to influence the rest of the map in a manner that would honestly scare you. Like, how do you take that lead and make it seem like everybody lost laning phase against you? And we're off with the Latin America's LLA in the upper bracket for round 1, 6 Karma versus Estral Esports. And, oh god, this can't be the quality of games from this region. Entertaining, and the fights are cool to watch, but a host of issues that come from both teams. First off, Estral have done a lot to play to their win conditions, the vision play, neutrals, their coordination is incredibly solid. The issues that I have are from random choices and decisions made in the interim of all of those good things. Random engages that don't need to happen, dying solo so frequently, choosing to go after Baron or other neutrals as the bases are under siege, things of that nature, just over and over. Now, 6 Karma fall under this issue also, just a little bit less egregious at times. It gives them the area where their highs are maybe not as high as Estral's, but their lows can be equally as low. Both teams suffer on the macro and micro level of poor choices that they make, and if this was just an ARAM game, I would say these two teams have standout performances. But as it is, these teams are not world caliber in the slightest. Estral does give me better hope than Rainbow 7 does in terms of that discussion with the LLA, but not much more. My MVP of the series goes to Lessa, who continued to find plays where needed and was the most consistent player in the roster. And we're off in the double elimination bracket portion of the Chinese LPL. We got ourselves LNG Esports versus JD Gaming, and wow, I didn't really expect it to go this particular direction. Honestly, LNG impressed me. So many of the mistakes that they had in their previous series are seemingly gone in this one. While they still lost, their consistent vision play, solid coordination, great closing approaches really helped in this particular series. Now, they sometimes rushed into neutral approaches and struggled when overforced in certain plays, but never was it so bad that I couldn't see them take the whole series against JD Gaming, whose biggest asset was the sheer caliber of their players on any given game. JD Gaming took what LNG have and polished it, and showed how solid they were once a lead was established by them. Now, it is hard to say that when JD Gaming didn't have a lead established in the early game, they kind of looked overwhelming. But that's mostly because of the way that LNG was matching them. Otherwise, JD Gaming is a terrifying team. This series showed that both of these teams are world's caliber. And with BLG, it's just a matter of finding the fourth team for the LPL. My MVP in this series is 369, who had the most consistent and scary play for every win that JD Gaming had. And we're off. It's in the first round of North America's LCS. In the upper bracket, we got over here Team Solo Mid versus Evil Geniuses, and I was not a fan of this series. Some fun stuff, like so many thoughts, but mostly on how disappointing the performance was. Now, there must be something that either team can bring, but it really came down to coordination, vision, neutral setups, and at best, either team was serviceable for these things, and otherwise, everything else was underwhelming. And the thing that really gets me here is the hesitation that both teams brought to the table. I'd find myself seeing something decent coming from either side being set up, only for it to be second guessed and take what would be a decent play into a haphazard one at best. Evil Genius is especially egregious in this situation, as it took them so long for their players to get going, especially Shaden. As Evil Geniuses continues in the upper bracket, I hope it doesn't continue to take them time to get their coordination going in these series. While TSM have solid early game, but outside of that, it's really rough. Neither team looked like world's caliber. My MVP of the series is Revenge, whose presence in and out of lane was enough to create chaos this series. And we're off, still into the upper bracket. In round 1 of North America's LCS, we've got Team Liquid versus NRG. I'm very worried for the LCS. From what I saw this particular time, the struggles with confidence, coordination, and macro plays in general, their vision play is inconsistent for both sides, and closing out games seems like a task that requires, a substitute teacher to check your work consistently. Both sides have some solid draft adaptations and at least some understanding of their win conditions, but they never seem to utilize it in game itself. NRG, at least on their part, is a lot more proactive, even at their own detriment sometimes. It means we get situations where they come back from large deficits that they have no right being competitive in to begin with. But I've got concerns about the troubling number of plays that had moments of hesitation or missed coordination. You need to have teams that are both confident and prepared. Otherwise, you just won't survive the international scene at all. My MVP for the series is Palafox for being a little bit more consistent and influencing the fights he's in to a solid degree. And we're back with China's LPL's lower bracket in the double elimination portion of their playoffs. We got Top Esports versus LNG Esports. And LNG continue to convince me that they are on par with Bilibili Gaming and JD Gaming. All three of those teams are some of the best reps that the LPL will have in a long time. Now, Top Esports have everything else on paper, some solid adaptations, some pretty good vision play, some solid enough coordination, but honestly, this team lacked the confidence. Neutral plays were kind of awful, and their ability to close out games were just atrocious to non-existent. I would hope that their regional qualifier run will have some changes to their play and a better approach overall, because as they are right now, they don't cut it as a world caliber team. LNG again show some of the best coordination, some great closing approaches, solid vision and adaptation from game to game. But I kind of continue to worry about some of these random mistakes that stall or throw the games entirely. Hopefully, their next matchup will get to show us something great, but for now, they've shown that they are confidently in third place for the LPL. My MVP of the series is Gala, whose damage output is rivaled by his survivability, maxing out for both. And we're off into Japan's LJL's lower bracket, round 1, V3 versus Sengoku Gaming. This was a nothing series. from the nature of the LJL playoffs, all teams automatically get into the playoffs and then get seeded in a very big, series, right? And seed 5 versus seed 8 of 8 teams was not going to be much. And yet I was still disappointed. V3 I just have no notes outside of just find a different set of players that can play together. Just not a solo queue roster. Sengoku Gaming my have you fallen since spring? There are some nuggets of brilliance here and there, but the biggest issue comes from the fact that there is an inability to close or play towards win conditions in this series. How does it take 10 extra minutes to close out a game with a 15k lead? Now, I hope it was because the series was against a team that had 0 wins altogether, and you were just about to use some flexing and practicing and fun, but I can't see that in the next round. This was barely even an evaluation. This series MVP, even if we can call it a series, is Jet, just for the amount of times he broke V3's ankles. Like, sometimes 5 people. Whoo! There's some really good series. There's some not so good series. Most of the series were kind of disappointing overall. But from what I saw, there was nothing as a strong trend. There's definitely a meta that's been developed that all of the regions so far that I participated really adhere to. The more interesting aspect is the Rel Jungle, which I think is superb in terms of the flex picks, because you end up with a lot of different variety. Rumble being in the meta is really good for that. The fact that there's still flexibilities for Renekton. The Lucian has been shown up also. There is an inkling of possibility for strong draft adaptations and interesting drafting in general and play. That being said, a lot of these need some level of coordination and dedicated play that across the board. This is over the entire region. Two teams so far have shown me that there are no questions about how they're going to do things. And if I'm going to be really specific about it, that is Bilibili Gaming, which is by far the favorite of Worlds. I know it's early. They played one best of 5, but given how fucking crazy they were, that's enough of an indication. And then Detonation FocusMe, who always looks dominant in their region all the time. So like, the LJL is not much of a place that right now is a kind of a mess. But there is this sense and this pervasive habit of setting up for a play around a neutral or for a dive or for anything. Being really prepared for it, and then one player goes through and the others kind of wait. Or there's like, they delay so long that it's easy to counter and go for a counter engage of some sort. And it worries me that this is the trend that we're seeing with one in the LPL is a premier league. Why is the majority of the teams showing so much hesitation? That is not okay. But it is also showing in the LCS, which is, sure, you may discount them as winners in some sense, but they consistently place in the top half ranking in the world regardless. And the fact that there's a hesitation in play from that region, from the LLA, who usually doesn't have hesitations, they're wild and crazy, but this time many of their series are playing off of bizarre mistakes and half efforts. I'm kind of worried for the state and quality of the games for now, right? Europe has not gone through their season finals. They're finishing their summer playoffs. For what that's worth, we'll get into that. The PCS, the VCS, whenever they're going to get their investigation/season done, one of the teams are probably going to be automatically disqualified regardless. As well as the CBLOL have yet to finish their season. The LCK is also rounding out theirs, and those are regions who tend to also have very confident teams. So hopefully that trend doesn't go on with there, but half of the regions not showing very much confident play is not great. But let's move on from there to I talked about this in MSI, but let's talk about formatting for worlds and for seasons. Okay. Everyone is very familiar with the 2 split season format, right? A spring or split 1 or opening, and then a summer split 2 closing, whatever you want to name it, is a very tried and true system that has issues, and to rectify them, we've had a couple of updates. And notably, those updates include the regional qualifiers, which does quite a bit to help with it. LCK and LPL run it, and they do it fantastically, especially this year with the LCK, who is playing more to the LPL style. Excellent. With the PCS, it is a little different because we no longer have the LCO, or we do, but the fact that they're losing 2 of their slots, and I've mentioned how bad that actually is for them. The LCO does not match the quality and caliber of the PCS at all. If they change my mind this year by actually winning a game or winning more than 1 game, then great. But it's a waste of time, and 2 teams who would have had some actual showing to go for, don't get that chance, right? Which is unfortunate. But the most egregious change, honestly, this year is still to the LEC. At first, their 3 split systems sounded okay until you got to the point where you technically have a 4 split system, and 3 of the playoffs are not playoffs, they're just continuations. There was a very strong chance, and if you're following the LEC at all, there was a strong chance that XL was not going to qualify for the season final and had 0 chances to make it at Worlds. But Koi was going to be able to qualify, who didn't even make it to the playoffs. Or did they? Hold on, double checking. Yeah, they didn't even make it to the playoffs. But because of the way the championship point system works, and to some credit, XL was hot garbage for winter and spring, but they were excellent and continue to still be excellent in summer. So I ask, why the fuck was it so close to having a team fall 3rd place in summer, where teams are the most competitive and are closest to their actual abilities at World Championships? How is it possible that they would have been eliminated for a team that placed 7th and didn't even make playoffs? The three split system does not work at all. And I am a little miffed, to say the least. Your European teams, I'm going to be very specific, because there's no African or Middle Eastern team in these rosters. Calling this an EMEA region is a lie. None of these European teams are playing as many games as they used to in the previous system. Just as a bar fact, right? They are playing less games, and the worst of the teams play even fewer games overall. If you are playing the best, you are first place across the board the entire time, then maybe you're playing an equivalent amount of games. But that requires you to be first the entire time. Something that is, quite frankly, not an expectation you can give on any of the teams. Because the team that was the most consistent, Mad Lions, still managed to fall 7th place. In summer specifically, and they still managed to qualify for the season finals for an actual championship spot because, what was it again? Yeah, they won spring. Riot, if this is the testing grounds and you find that this is somehow a successful thing for, I don't know, the future of any other given region, don't. Revert it, please. Because this is not good for these teams. It can't be good for the sponsorship of these teams either, because the less these teams play, the less their sponsorships actually get shown on screen, the less of a chance they have the ability to like show their stuff and be competitive. Europe as a whole, as a region, is historically going to be fine because of their infrastructure, but competitive on-stage games are very different from scrims. And I feel like they're going to do worse at Worlds versus the higher competitors. And in fact, I think that they're going to have a harder time in general if this is how the seasons keep going for that region. 1 year is not going to undo what has been like over a decade of excellence out of the European region. But continuing with this particular trend may not be great. Yeah. Those are my thoughts, at least for this week, this 1+ week, because I didn't think I had enough games to really give a thought on the situation. But I would love to hear what you have to think. What do you say about for the playoff games that I've played so far? Do you think that yes, there seems to be a lot more hesitation than usual? Or do you think it might be some jitters, and over time you'll see more teams get better and better at it? I hope that's really not it, but we'll see. And do you agree or disagree about the different formats, especially with the LEC format not being great at all? Or do you have a different perspective about the kind of positives that can come from it? Because I definitely thought this was a good format up until MSI. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, as well as which of your series so far that I've played are your favorite. I'd love to hear them. Again, thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you, hopefully, next week.